Good morning, y'all. We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I am your host, Justin Michael. Hope everybody is enjoying their Wednesday morning. We're changing the schedule up here a little bit for the next couple of weeks with CSU football having spring practices on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. We're going to pivot to a Wednesday and Friday morning show schedule. So just keep that in mind. We've gone live on Thursdays for years and years. We might end up going back to that format just because it's what everybody knows. But for the next couple of weeks, so we can get a little bit more CSU football content in, which admittedly probably has been lacking a little bit more than previous years just because of an extended basketball season, which was immediately followed up by the Nique Medved news and then a coaching search. And now we've got all the transfer stuff. So it's just been a bit of a whirlwind. But we've got a lot to get into today. We are talking hoops and football. A loaded show. I'm looking forward to it. Shout out to everybody that's rocking with us live this morning. If you wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up, saying what's up in the Toyota chat, I'd love to hear from all of you guys. First things first, before we talk about a big-time transfer commitment for CSU men's basketball, Carey Booth, who the Rams went after hard last spring, ultimately missed out on him. He landed at Illinois, where he played a reserve role this past year. But it's come full circle. Former top 100 recruit has committed to CSU. We'll talk about him. Expectations, how the Nique Clifford story can be a repeatable process potentially for the Rams. It's certainly a strong selling point when it comes to recruitment. We're also going to talk about the latest transfer news in terms of the departures. Croc obviously following Medved to Minnesota. If you're a DNVR diehard, you found that out yesterday morning. I've now seen a couple of national reports drop it, though, so I think that's pretty widespread at this point. We'll get into CSU football. I'll talk about some questions I have going into the summer here. We'll play an interview with Rocky Beers. The transfer tight end is looking really good. Former Florida Atlantic and Air Force tight end. Florida Atlantic, Florida International. Mixing up those two schools at the moment. We'll get into some way too early observations. You got to take all observations from spring with a grain of salt. But obviously, guys can earn some opportunity in the fall based on what they show here over the next month or so. I did want to open up the show, just so I don't forget to do it, by shouting out Kelly Lyle, longtime journalist of the Fort Collins Coloradoan. He is the recipient of the Kelly McGregor Servant Award. Really awesome recognition of a guy who has meant a lot to this community for a really long time. Kelly was on the CSU football and CSU men's basketball beat before Kevin kind of took over that role, but he still writes for the Coloradoan, covering education, community stuff. Just a really great guy who has been a longtime mentor of mine, somebody who I consider a friend, somebody who helped me a lot in my earlier years. You know, was not one of those old school journalists that didn't have the time of day for, an up and comer like myself. I really owe a lot to, guys like him. And, I've talked a lot about my friendship and my relationship with Kevin Lytle and Mike Brohard and all these guys. Like they've been in my corner for a long time, but I did want to make sure that we recognized a great guy in Kevin Lytle, Kelly Lyle. Say that 10 times fast. I'm so glad that April Fool's Day is over. It was funny to me that we had a lot of news drop on April Fool's Day, the Carey Booth stuff and Croc going to Minnesota and all that. And I had people replying to me, can I take this seriously? I will say, if there's ever an April Fool's post from the DNVR Rams account, that will have been posted by like a social media admin or something like that. Somebody else on our staff, not me. I am far too cranky for April Fool's Day. Maybe I'm just old and boring at this point, but I can't stand April Fool's Day. I can't stand anything about it. I think it's dumber than the wave, which I already went on an old man rant about the other night on Twitter with the Avs game. Avs up 2-0 in the third period. They start the wave, immediately collapse and lose the game. Some are saying ban the wave. I know it's fun for little kids, but I just I'm old and cranky about stuff. You gotta cut me a little bit of slack. I'm also tired because I stayed up and watched the Nuggets blow a game against Minnesota, who I'm not exactly stoked on at the minute. Just the entire state of Minnesota, between them, taking Medved and a couple of the star players, and the Nuggets Timberwolves. They've got Denver's number. So I'm just anti-Minnesota in general, which is a little bit awkward because I've got family there. And then lastly, if you missed it, I know this is a lot of random stuff at the beginning here, but Tim McGraw is going to be coming to Canvas Stadium this summer along with John Party, which is really, really cool. That's of course part of the PBR event, which is a massive thing for Fort Collins. I don't know exactly what happened in terms of the PBR, the Pro Bull Riding Circuit, and Cheyenne Frontier Days, but something happened there. They're not going to Cheyenne. They're coming to Fort Collins, which is a really big deal. I mean, it's one of the most significant rodeos in the world. So to have that in Fort Collins, which obviously is a community with, significant ag roots, CSU, a significantly agriculturally influenced school in general. So I just think it's really cool. It feels very natural. And I think that's going to draw massive, massive crowds and can be a really awesome exposure opportunity for CSU football, for CSU as an institution, and for Fort Collins. So I'm really excited about that. I genuinely think that is a big deal. Let's get into everything here. Good morning again to everybody rocking with us. Already great to see the Toyota chat popping. Mile High Minute, Crackers College Hoops. We got Swole in the mix. Great to see you guys. I guess let's just start with the departures, and then we'll talk about Carey Booth. We'll get into the excitement. We'll eat our vegetables first, then we'll get into the more fun stuff. If you've missed it, now technically 5 transfer departures if you're counting walk-ons, but 4 scholarship players in Jaden Stepp, Keyshawn Williams, Jalen Crocker-Johnson, and Kyan Evans. Jaden Stepp, that news came out a couple of days ago. He, of course, was a very highly touted recruit coming out of high school. Good frame, a versatile game from what you could see at the high school level. It's always kind of tough to judge the huddle stuff just because the level of competition can admittedly be deceptive. It can make somebody look better than they are. I think in general, the recruiting rankings probably set an unrealistic expectation for what Stepp was going to be, at least off the bat. Like, I'm not saying he can't be a good player. I think he's got pretty good potential still, but I think it was pretty clear early on that he wasn't going to be necessarily what people envisioned when he signed. And based on the fact that the staff was willing to burn a year of eligibility and play him this year, I don't really think they were all that worried about the long-term implication of that. There were some other freshmen, that they decided to maintain their eligibility. So there's, some writing on the wall that you can kind of read there. Seems like a situation that's probably best for both sides. I'm not sure if he really would have had much of a role on the team next season. From what I've heard, likely that he'll go back to the Pacific Northwest, which makes a lot of sense. Maybe somewhere like Portland State was what I've heard. But we'll see. Certainly wish him well. Not trying to besmirch him or anything like that, but I only bring all of this up because when you lose somebody who was billed as a 4-star prospect, and he was, I think, based on some recruiting sites, a lot of the time the fans are going to flip out and kind of view this as a devastating situation. And again, I do think he's got a good frame, a versatile game. He's got an opportunity to turn into something down the line. I don't think this is a situation where you panic and think the sky is falling or anything like that. And I'd say the same thing about Keyshawn Williams. Now, Williams would have had a role on the team next year if he came back. I think it essentially would have been the exact same role that he had this year, which is spark plug off the bench, come in, get some shots up, try to score a little bit. But I don't think he was going to be much more than that. When Kyan Evans announced his transfer decision, I saw a couple people actually float the possibility of that meaning Williams could, make a big leap next year. First of all, they're they're different roles. Keyshawn more of a two guard than a true point guard. And secondly, I just think in terms of being a starter, he's not consistent enough defensively. Probably a little bit too erratic offensively, was definitely very streaky when it came to scoring. He had some big moments, don't get me wrong. Like, he hit some big shots in the Mountain West tournament as well as the NCAA tournament. So I'm rooting for him. I enjoyed covering him. I thought it was really neat that after, basically being out of basketball for the majority of the last 2 years due to injuries, he was able to find his footing again, reach the NCAA tournament. It was a cool story. Now I imagine he'll go, he's played at Northern Illinois and Tulsa. In the past, I imagine he'll go somewhere more along those lines of competition. Maybe I'll be wrong. You never know with some of these guys. And again, he's a guy that can play, but you have to weigh every transfer situation differently. When there's as much roster movement as there is in 2025, you can't go full Humpty Dumpty every time somebody decides to leave, because that's just what the game is today. And frankly, far more times than the fans seem to recognize, a lot of these guys, it's kind of a mutual ordeal. It's a situation where the staff gives them a very honest evaluation of what their standing currently is and what the role they will, assumingly have in the future will be. You can take that, you can stay, or, maybe you look somewhere else. I don't think every time somebody transfers, it's cause for concern or a situation where we need to overreact or come up with some hot take of how this is indicative of a lost locker room or culture issue or anything like that. It's not that. It's just a guy who, in his final year of collegiate eligibility, is going to be looking for just a little bit of a larger role, and that's fine. But if you're CSU, you can find somebody to fill that role next season. It's really not. It's not that big of a deal. Obviously, wish him well. I'd love to see him land in a starting spot. Score 20 points a game like he did a couple years ago against lower competition. That would be really cool. But that's kind of where I'm at with that decision. Again, not trying to bash either of those guys. I just am trying to give context so that we can evaluate the situation and essentially react appropriately. Now, losing Jalen Crocker-Johnson and Kyan Evans, that stings. It stings a lot. I do think that hiring Ali Farokhmanesh probably gave CSU the best chance of retaining those guys. It was never a guarantee, though. And you really can't be that surprised that Croc wants to follow Medved to Minnesota. I heard he's getting a nice payday, not quite $1 million, but close to it is what it sounds like. I think he can basically fill the exact type of role for Minnesota that he had at CSU, which is a stretch four, guy that can step out and hit some threes on you. But he proved against Memphis and how he hung against Maryland there that his game can translate against bigger, more explosive guys. And I do think that he will translate well for Minnesota. I will say, I think had he come back to CSU, his ceiling is probably higher against this level of competition. I think he probably could have been in the all-conference mix, especially with, a few more touches per game. There's going to be a lot more touches, to be had by somebody next year. Obviously, the roster is still being constructed, but I'm not surprised at all. I think he will do well at Minnesota, be a guy that can score 10 to 12 points a game, pull down a couple of boards, hit some threes, but also post up. And we'll see how it works out there. But Minnesota needed guys. It makes sense. We'll be rooting for him. Kyan Evans still to be determined. He could follow Medved. I did see that for whatever reason, the other transfer departures are no longer listed on the CSU basketball roster. Kyan still is. Maybe that's as simple as just hoping he'll change his mind at the last second. I've heard the offers that he's gotten are pretty crazy. Mile High Minute here in the Toyota chat says percentage chance that Kyan doesn't come back to CSU. More than likely. If I had to guess at this point, I'd say 75, 80% he's gone. And I can't speak for him. I haven't picked his brain, but that would be where I would put it at if I had to make an assumption based on the type of interest he's getting in the portal, based on the kind of offers he's getting. I mean, I really think he can get $1 million plus if that is a big priority for him. I don't know if he's going to get that from Minnesota necessarily, but I do think he's a guy that is going to have big time offers, coming out of the portal. So we'll see what happens with all those guys. You wish them well. I mean, I think Cayenne could really end up at a blue blood. I think he could play somewhere at Creighton. Like, he'd be an incredible fit in that offense. I don't really know how much to read into the roster stuff and him being listed on it online. We've got a couple of people asking about it, but my guess is it's just as simple as technically he still could come back, and he hasn't officially made a decision. So, why burn that bridge? And even if it's just for the sake of optics, like, just keep him listed until it's 100% certain that he will no longer be with the green and gold. But he's receiving big time interest, and it's not surprising. I think his ceiling is really, really high. I think he could have been a conference player of the year type guy for us. I think he can be a lethal scorer, even, in a quote unquote, better league. So that's where we're at with all that. We're going to get into Carey Booth, and we'll switch over to football. After that, we'll play the Rocky Beers interview, talk about some position groups I'm interested to follow. But real quick, we got to take a break. We got to pay the bills. With Empire today, you get the right product for your needs, quick and professional installation, along with shop-at-home convenience and a price match guarantee. Nobody does it better than Empire today. Their philosophy is to help you find the flooring you need, not overwhelm you with thousands of choices of substitutes. What they omit from their selection, honestly, as important as what they include. A lot of places out there, they're just trying to sell you slop that they wouldn't put in their own homes. With Empire today, that's not what they're about. They want to show you the best possible products for you that's going to last. And what's really cool is with their virtual floor designer, it's a great way to see how floors will look in any space. All you got to do is snap a picture, boom, you can see instantly, what is this going to look like in my living room, in my bedroom, etc. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can get a $350 discount when they use the promo code DNVR. Restrictions do apply. See EmpireToday.com/DNVR for details. I also would like to shout out Lucy Nicotine, 100% pure nicotine, always tobacco-free. Lucy Breakers are nicotine pouches with an extra surprise. Each pouch holds a capsule that can be broken to open a little extra flavor and hydration so you don't get that nasty texture in your mouth. I'm a big mango guy. The mint is awesome. What I really love about Lucy in particular is that they have a 4 milligram option. Sometimes you're looking for a little bit more than the traditional 3 that you see at a lot of places, but sometimes like a 6 and 8, that can be a bit overwhelming. Maybe I'm soft. I don't know. But 4 milligram is much more up my alley. Working on a late night article, trying to lock in something like that. Go to lucy.co/DNVR. Use that promo code DNVR to get 20% off your first order. Lucy has a 30-day refund policy. If you change your mind, again, that's lucy.co, and use the code DNVR to get 20% off. Here comes the fine print. Lucy products are only for adults of legal age. Every order is age verified. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. Every time I do the Lucy read and I do the warning at the end, it makes me think of Kevin in The Office, trying to warn everybody that Robert California is coming back. Warning, warning, warning. The future of CSU basketball is still bright. The sky is not falling. It's unfortunate that it's looking like Cayenne and Croc will both be gone next year. Those guys were a big part of what allowed CSU to have this incredible stretch, what allowed them to make the NCAA tournament, all of that. But I think that there's significant interest in coming to CSU from some highly talented players. And the first commitment here of the Ali Farokhmanesh era is a bit of a banger in Carey Booth, former top 100 recruit, former top 60 recruit, based on all the sites. I think 247, excuse me, had him at 55, whereas ESPN had him as 57. But obviously, that's a pretty impressive place to be in terms of how you're viewed. 6'10", 215 pounds. He is highly athletic. He is highly explosive. When you watch some of his prep academy film from his senior year, a lot of explosive dunks, but he's also a guy that can, step out and stretch the floor a little bit, knock down some threes. That's where most of his scoring production came his freshman year at Notre Dame. I think more than half of his points that year came from the 3-point line, but don't fact check me on that one. It might only be more like 30-40%, but the point was he hit them at a pretty decent rate. Let's see, he was, got it in my notes here, 36% from 3-point as a freshman at Notre Dame. Played a pretty big role. I mean, started almost 20 games. He ended up really coming on strong as the season ended, which I did think that was encouraging, just kind of diving through some of his game logs at Notre Dame. Flashed early, scored 20 points in his second ever game against Western Carolina. He had a December game against UVA where he had like 17 points. So, I mean, he flashed early, which is what you hope for when somebody is as propped up as he was, as a recruit. When you're a 4-star prospect, obviously you're going to come in with some expectations, whether that's fair or not, whether it's realistic or not. I mean, again, we just talked about Jaden Stepp. He was a 4-star recruit at one point as well. Sometimes that can create unrealistic expectations, but it makes a lot of sense when you look at Booth on a couple of levels. First of all, you can't teach being 6'10", 210 pounds, especially a guy that can move well, is agile, has nice lateral movement, is explosive going to the rim, and can shoot the ball a little bit. It makes total sense why he was as ranked as high of a prospect as he was. He also played on one of the best prep teams in the country at Brewster Academy. I read somewhere that they had 9 guys from that team signed Division I. So, I mean, he's been playing against elite competition the last couple of years, whether that be a prep academy or then going to Notre Dame as a freshman, mostly due to his relationship with the coaching staff. He ended up having a coaching change, so he goes from Notre Dame to Illinois. Sees a significant decrease in his role. I mean, as a true freshman, played in 656 minutes at Notre Dame, only played in 108 minutes at Illinois all season, was basically an end of the rotation guy for them. That's obviously a big time program with a ton of talent. So it's stiff competition you're going up against. It's tough fighting to get on the floor. But you're not getting a guy who did a ton this past season at Illinois. So he'll be looking for an opportunity to prove himself. And to me, this is the perfect example of why relationships matter in this industry, why you try to never burn bridges. CSU went really hard at Carey Booth when he left Notre Dame. He was one of their top targets, if not the top target this past year. I mean, again, you can't teach 6'10", 210 pounds with explosiveness. He ultimately landed at Illinois, not shocking. When you're a high school recruit, you're a top 100 player, you're getting offers from Florida and all these big time programs, and you ultimately signed with Penn State at one point and then ultimately landed at Notre Dame. It's not surprising that he wanted one more shot at like a bigger program, bigger lights, more attention, all of that. He's also been around, the NBA his whole life, being the son of Nuggets GM Calvin Booth, who played in the league as well. So I'm sure he has very high expectations for himself, and I'm sure he has the belief that he can play at that level. He's been around basketball his entire life. He's been around basketball at the highest level his entire life. I think it speaks to his mentality and his maturity that this time around he prioritized, 1, having a relationship with the staff, and 2, fit, like an opportunity where he can grow as a player, a place where he's likely going to be able to get a lot of minutes, a lot of touches, and just grow. Now, I will say, only because I mentioned this on Twitter, I talked about Nique Clifford was a 4-star recruit who went to CU, flashed early, but didn't truly pan out. And then he comes to CSU. The last 2 years have obviously been incredible. Now he's going to be a top 20 pick. Carey Booth, 4-star recruit, has played at the high major level, didn't work out, needs an opportunity to prove himself. He's looking for a chance to show he belongs in the NBA, a lot like Nique Clifford. It's a perfect fit at CSU. It's a perfect storyline after what we just saw with Nique. Because, the comparisons are going to come up naturally, I do want to say, just from a realistic standpoint off the bat, Nique Clifford was more refined coming out of Boulder than Carey Booth is coming out of Illinois. I've talked to some national guys about it. They've been honest. Temper your expectations right away. I don't think he's going to light the world on fire right out of the gate. I could be wrong. I hope to be wrong even. But like I do want that to be clear. He's a guy who has a very high ceiling because of his athleticism, because of his frame, because of his versatility, because he can step out and shoot the ball on you and also dunk on your face. Like, there's a lot to like about Carey Booth, but there's a lot of refinement and growth that's going to be necessary for him to, be an NBA prospect. And I assume that is, his goal here in coming to CSU. And obviously it's cool that he can play closer to his dad. The Nuggets, they've been around CSU quite a bit. So I do think that the relationship with the staff, even though Medved is no longer in the mix, probably came full circle. I imagine they've had a lot of conversations with Ali these past couple of years. Their interest in Nique Clifford is very much legitimate. I mean, the Nuggets had scouts at Moby as much, if not more, than anybody in the NBA this season. Charlotte, it seems like, has a lot of interest in Nique Clifford as well, just based on the amount of times they came out to watch him. They've got a couple of first-round picks, so that kind of makes sense. But I really do think that it's a great opportunity for Carey Booth. I think this is a process that can hopefully be repeatable for CSU, is finding guys like Nique Clifford, like Carey Booth, who have incredibly high ceilings, who have, frankly, a caliber of athleticism that CSU probably would not have been in the mix for 10 years ago. As much as the portal can be frustrating at times, as much as it can make you want to rip your hair out, there are some strengths in terms of the type of players they can open up these Mountain West teams to, even if only for a year or two at a time. Like, I do think it helps having guys like Nique Clifford that, have that storyline and have proven that if you go to the Mountain West, you can play your way, into NBA consideration. Like that's a big deal. And I think that's something that CSU can hope for, maybe not on a yearly basis, but that would be great if like once a year you could land somebody who's a freaky athlete who, comes from a big time program and probably just needs an opportunity to refine things and maybe needs a little bit of a step down in competition. The Mountain West is an incredible basketball league. But it's also not the Big Ten. I think that's fair to say. And I also think it's fair to say that frame, that athleticism, that type of player, he's going to stand out a little bit more, in the Mountain West. And I think it gives you a chance to grow some confidence and just get some playing time. That's really what he needs, is an opportunity to grow and play. Saw the floor a decent amount as a true freshman at Notre Dame, but only playing a little bit over 100 minutes this past year. Like he just needs touches. He just needs reps. And I can't sit here and promise that he's going to be the next Nique Clifford, but he certainly has that type of possibility, and his ceiling with that frame, with that athleticism is very, very high. I would really love to see him play 2 years. He's a guy that I think by the end of next season will really be starting to look pretty good. Probably could use 2 full years of, playing a significant role, just getting these games in, giving himself a chance to grow. And if he did that, I really do think he could be an NBA guy down the line. It's not going to hurt his cause to have the family connections either. Let's just be real. That is always a part of the process. But it's going to take some time. And so I just hope that Ram fans are patient. I've said some similar things last year about Nicola Japa, in terms of, man, that ceiling is really high just because, there aren't very many 7-footers that can step out and hit a three, but give you some rim protection. But he also, was making a big step up. Carey has played against a lot stiffer competition than Japa has the last couple of years, but I mean more along the lines of they've got a decently high ceiling. I mean, Booth's got a way higher ceiling than Japa, but they just need a chance to grow. They need some refinement. And if they get some minutes here, I think there's a really good chance that this works out well for CSU. I think it's a it's a gamble worth taking really on both sides. Like at this point, if you're Carey Booth, could you have gone to another high major? Yeah, I'm sure someone would have taken a guy that's 6'10", 210 pounds, has those type of connections to the NBA. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. I could see a big school just be willing to take Booth for the connections alone. But by coming to CSU, he's going to have a real opportunity to prove himself. And that's where he's at kind of in his career. Can he take that next step in his evolution? We shall see. But I'm really, really excited about him because I just think a guy that's that big and strong, that can shoot the ball, but can also, be a rim runner that can hopefully provide you with a little bit of rim protection as well. We'll see. I think he's more of a 4 than a 5. I envision him in that Jalen Crocker-Johnson, Patrick Cartier type role. Less refined, less consistent as a shooter than both of those guys. But he was 36% from 3-point as a freshman. So it's not like he can't shoot the ball. And especially if you get more touches, I could really see him breaking out at the Rams. I'm excited to see what happens. Somebody in the Mile High Minute in the Toyota chat says Carmelo Anthony headed to the Hall of Fame. Shout out Melo. I know that's a controversial take amongst some, but I wouldn't be the basketball fan I am today if it wasn't for him. We can talk more about Carey Booth here over the next couple weeks. Obviously, we've got a lot of time until the season begins. I do think it's a great way to start this recruiting class. I think it shows the type of interest there will be at CSU. I'll be very curious to see what they do next. I mean, assumingly going to need a point guard, probably a couple of wings, given that Lake and Clifford were just such big pieces on both sides of the ball for you. But this is a really good start. And while it hurts to lose Croc, while it likely will hurt to lose Cayenne, I still think there's a possibility for this team to be pretty good if they can add a couple of more key pieces here. And based on what I'm hearing, they're optimistic about, putting together a nice little roster for year one. All right, let's take another break. Let's shout out a couple of our other friends, then we'll talk football. All right, Coors Light. Got my Coors Light crew neck on, actually. They encourage you to choose a chill state of mind, whether it be the transfer portal or work or spring snow or I-25 or you name it. There's a lot of things that can get you worked up in life. Our friends at Coors Light encourage you to rise above, to choose a chill state of mind. Life's all about how you manage things, how you deal with the curveballs that get thrown your way. Hopefully you can deal with them then better than the Colorado Rockies, who are already a disaster. They're already like a full 4 games out in the NL West. But it's all right. I'm not going to let it bring me down. I'm going to choose a chill state of mind, maybe sit back, kick my feet up, laugh a little bit at the misery, right? Like you have to as a Rockies fan. What else can we do at this point? I'm really trying to get back into baseball this year. We'll see how it goes. When the mountains turn blue, it's as cold as the Rockies. Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smooth finish. Choose chill this winter, then reach for a Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door by visiting CoorsLight.com/DNVR, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. I also would like to shout out Shady Rays. The future is bright when you've got your Shady Rays on. Get ready for the season ahead with quality shades built to last. Shady Rays is obviously an independent sunglasses company, but they offer a world-class product that's rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Durable frames, crystal clear optics. They've got polarized lenses. What's awesome about Shady Rays is they've got a little bit of something for everyone. I've got multiple pairs. I wear them, poolside. I wear them while I'm traveling, when I'm walking the dog, when I'm hopefully out at Coors Field a couple times having a good time this summer. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays giving out the best deal of the season. Go to ShadyRays.com. Use that code DNVR for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. All right. I had a couple of people send me a post that was being shared by some CSU football players from Lewis Brown, sharing some highlights of himself these past couple of years with like the caption, one more go around or something along those lines. Unsurprisingly, a lot of Ram fans, they wanted to know, does that mean maybe things had changed Unfortunately, that is not the case. He will not be back at CSU, still kicked off the team. He does have a year of eligibility remaining, so he can transfer and play somewhere else technically. But again, LB no longer on the team. I don't anticipate that changing. Got a lot of talent. I hope it works out for him. I'm not rooting against him. I also don't think it was the worst decision from a culture standpoint to move on from somebody who you've had to babysit his entire career, who's had some issues in terms of maturity and obviously got in trouble off the field at some point. You just run out of slack and you say enough is enough. And as talented as a player might be, the detriment that they could have inside the locker room to, the foundation and the culture and all that and all the cliches we love to use. But it's true. Like, I've seen it happen firsthand. What happens when the rules are too drastically different for certain players than it is for everybody else? I think that was a big part of the downfall of the Mike Bobo era. Is, a guy like Preston Williams was obviously incredibly talented. He had a phenomenal year. I mean, there's a reason he was the number one wide receiver recruit in the country at one point, but just constantly got in trouble off the field, constantly missed team meetings. And when you allow a guy, even if they're a stud, to walk all over you and not be a part of the team and not follow the same rules that everyone else does. And I know when it comes to stars, they're always going to have a little bit more leeway than anybody else. But again, I think at some point it just becomes an enough is enough type situation. Like, we just can't do this anymore. We're too far into the process to be still dealing with this type of immaturity and headaches. So that's kind of my 2 cents on all of it. I am rooting for him. I think he's got NFL potential, but he's a guy that's going to have to figure some things out off the field and frankly grow up a little bit if he's ever going to reach that potential. All right, we're going to play the Rocky Beers interview here in just a second. I did want to throw out a couple of position changes that I noted on the roster. Kennedy McDowell, going into his junior year, now listed as an outside linebacker. I think he'll be more of like an edge rusher, stand-up guy instead of hand on the ground. I like that a lot. 6'4", 200 pounds. So he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's super quick off the snap. So he had some success, as an edge rusher this past year and some NASCAR type packages. But I think opposite of Jaquez Evans, who looks the part athletically, you can only gain so much from spring ball, especially when they're not even in full pads, they're in shorts. But he looks the part from an eye test standpoint when it comes to athleticism. And I think that's the truth. With a lot of these transfers, we'll get into some observations here in just a second. I'll also kind of throw out some questions I have about the team, about some position battles, all that stuff. But like I said, position changes: Kennedy McDowell moving from defensive end to outside linebacker, and Jaden Landrum, who was a wide receiver in high school, was recruited to play linebacker, wide receiver, safety, was originally transitioning to linebacker. He is now listed at tight end, 6'3", 240-pound redshirt freshman at Etiquanda High School. Guy who really runs well. Again, he had that wide receiver background, so I think it makes a lot of sense. But it'll be interesting to see if he can kind of branch out at tight end. The tight end room in general, I think, is going to be really important for CSU this year. One, just because you were hoping to be able to depend on Lewis Brown, some other wide receivers. We'll see what happens. Neither Armani Winfield or Kojo Antwi are participating in spring ball. We won't be able to talk to Jay until Saturday, so maybe we'll get an answer there in terms of what the status is. I think it's health related, but again, we'll have to ask him what exactly the deal is there. You're pretty young at wide receiver, so if you can get Rocky Beers to really break out, if Jackson Warren can get healthy, they're really excited about him. You also bring over Carlos Anaya, and now you're moving Jaden Landrum to tight end. There's an opportunity for that to be a pretty key position and to run some 2 tight end sets, like we used to see back in the day with Kevon Cartwright and Crockett Gilmore. I would love that. I'm a big tight end guy. But here is the interview that Kevin Lytle and I had with transfer tight end Rocky Beers. You've been on campus now for a couple months, first week into spring ball. How are you adjusting to life in Fort Collins?
It's going great. I love Fort Collins. They got a bunch of food spots. I go to a new food spot every weekend. The team's great. They were really accepting of me my first week here, and it's been downhill ever since then, uphill, whatever you say.
Yeah.
It's been going great. I love it here.
What's the top food spot so far?
I'm gonna have to go with Austin's. It's on the corner. It's got some really good filet mignon. Those asparagus are nice.
Nice, going big time.
Yeah.
The offense, kind of, what do you like about it? How do you kind of see your fit in this system?
For me, I'm just gonna go where my coaches tell me to. I really like how the tight end is split out quite a lot, majority of the time, and I really enjoy my tight ends coach. He's pushing me to be better every day.
Yeah, are you looking forward to some of those pass catching opportunities? Obviously, they've had some success with some high-level tight ends.
There's definitely some lineage here with McBride and Dolan Holker, and Jax is here too. He'll be back with us at the end of spring once his shoulders heal up. So I have some big shoes to fill. I'm just hoping to contribute.
Was that part of when you're kind of going through the transfer recruiting process of kind of looking at system fit, obviously, and places where you can kind of elevate?
Absolutely. I wanted to be at a spot where they're going to use their tight ends, and I know CSU has that reputation. So.
What does it mean to you to have a chance to play in front of friends and family?
Oh, it's everything. Before this, I was down in Miami, and that's a long ways for friends and family to go. Not a lot of them could get down to the games, but pretty close to home, only an hour from home, and I'll have everybody coming. I'm excited.
It seems like you were kind of starting to branch out, and the offense start to really make an impact for your injury, unfortunately. Just what was that process like, getting back healthy and getting back to being on the field?
Yeah, it was a long process, but I had a lot of good people surrounding me. I stayed at home while I rehabbed, so that was crucial. Being close to family helped a lot. And my physical therapists were great. We worked 4 or 5 days a week, and I still text them on a daily basis, let them know what's up, keep them on the same page, and they send me workouts. And Coach Hope, our assistant strength coach, she's doing a great job too. She works with me a lot, getting my hamstrings right.
Did you have some guys on this team that were kind of, recruiting you, so to speak, in the portal?
100%. Tubbs, big old Tubbs. I went to high school with him. So as soon as I hit that portal, he's like, get your butt up to Fort Collins. And I packed my bags. I said, sure, let's do it.
Did he have a big recruiting pitch, or was it basically that? Just like,
you got to get here. Yeah. He's like, come home, play for some Rams for your last couple of years. I said, sign me up.
Did it make the decision easier, just given that they were coming off of a bowl season? I mean, it's a program that obviously has not had a ton of success the last couple of decades.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you want to go where you're going to win, right? And you don't want to go where you get better, and that's CSU for me.
What's your impression of Braden so far?
Oh, I love Braden. Me and him are starting to build some chemistry, and that's pretty cool because I've never really developed chemistry with a QB before. At Air Force in the run game, and then FIU is just a bunch of inline stuff. So here, I'm starting to develop chemistry with Braden. I like it a lot.
Is it a little bit weird being on this side of things, just given CSU and Air Force, kind of a history?
It's definitely weird. I can't wait to play them this year. I'm excited for that. Hopefully, have a game against them.
Thank you.
Good.
I appreciate Rocky for giving us a couple of minutes there. Seems like he's really enjoying his time at Fort Collins. It's always cool when a Colorado kid gets an opportunity to come back home, an opportunity to play. I think he's going to be a big factor in the offense this year. He certainly looks the part. Again, like they're only in shorts, but just with the way that he moves, he's got good hands. I'd be pretty surprised if he doesn't have a pretty substantial role in the offense this year for CSU. So that's really exciting that he's been able to hit the ground running the way that he has. It's big that he can be here in spring and establish that chemistry, that rapport with BFN, especially because Jackson Warren is not cleared at the moment, still dealing with that shoulder issue. There should be good, I think, by fall. But just big that he can get those reps, and it's good that he seems to be, what is the word, assimilating well, at CSU. Josh in the Toyota chat wants to know, who's your breakout star for football and which freshman might get playing time? I would say Rocky Beers is my breakout star, at least on the offensive side. I think he is going to be one of the most important additions, a lot like Dallin Holker was from BYU a couple years ago. I would be really surprised if he is not a big-time part of this offense. Defensively, I'll throw out Jaquez Evans, who's, maybe a bit of a chalk pick. I really think some of the D linemen that they brought over have a chance to branch out as well. But Evans he's big, he's strong, he's quick coming off the edge. I think those guys are in line for pretty big years. As far as potential freshmen who could get playing time, Clarence Taylor, the wide receiver out of Alabama, he can really fly. He's here this spring, I believe, so he could he could maybe branch out early, kind of like Jordan Ross did this past season. Cannon Valenzuela, though, who's not on campus yet, I think he is the guy I'm most excited about in terms of the freshmen in this class. I love his athletic profile. I had an opportunity to chat with him when he committed and have him on the show. He certainly got a good head on his shoulders, but I just love his versatility, man. And I think he is going to be a steal for CSU at linebacker, a lot like Owen Long has proved to be. And I think that's kind of a good way to segue this into kind of the direction I had envisioned for this segment, which is just throw out some way too early observations. Only been at one practice so far, so we haven't had an opportunity to be able to get a ton, but we will have plenty to talk about over this next month. As far as some questions I have going in, who wins the kicking battle? You were able to rely on Jordan Noyes the last couple of years. He was clutch, big leg, hit some really big kicks for you. Who's able to kind of take the role there? They signed Dylan Freebury in part of this freshman class. He was a 3-star prospect coming in, although I feel like every kicker is a 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. We'll see, though, kind of what happens there. You also have Brian Hansen back, who is more of your kickoff specialist these past couple of years. Maybe he steps into that role, but I do think the specialists in general, that is an area I'm going to be following pretty closely. I want to know who takes advantage as far as the defensive returners go. There's going to be a lot of new faces on that defense. And I talked about Jacob Ellis yesterday, and he intercepted Braden on the final play of practice, red zone drill scenario. Unsurprisingly, got a ton of responses, kind of mocking Braden and all that. And that wasn't the intent of that post, first of all. That's why I'm always hesitant to share info from practice, because I think people overreact with not enough context. I mean, in those red zone drills specifically, they're encouraging you to take some chances at times, and you're just working on things. Like you're gonna make some mistakes in practice. That's part of the process. I meant it more as, man, Ellis is moving well out there. I'm excited to see what he does. But as far as the returners go, like, can Owen Long make a leap at linebacker that I think he's capable of? He's a great athlete, really rangy, showed great instincts last year. He's kind of a heat-seeking missile going downhill, good tackler. Can he be a big-time playmaker for you, especially now that Chase Wilson is no longer in the mix? I think they'll run a lot of different stuff, but it kind of looked like they're leaning into more of a 3-4, which makes sense given the lack of depth you have in the interior. You've got some linebackers that can move a little bit better. Again, you move Kennedy outside, have those two on the outside, assumingly have like Owen Long, Drew Rodriguez in the interior, Jacob Ellis as well. Those three, I think you can kind of rotate. It should be a nice little mix at linebacker, but like in the secondary, you've got Aiden Hector back, you've got Dylan Phelps back, I've got AJ Noland, a redshirt freshman, back, but there's not much continuity there in that secondary. It looks like Noland and Hector were playing safety yesterday, so those are probably the front runners to start there in place of Howell and Blackburn. I imagine Noland more of that Blackburn role, Hector more of that Howell role. But at corner, Phelps, I'm really excited they were able to hang on to him. He's got good length, has gotten experience these last couple of years. I think he'll be in the mix with Jahari Rogers and Lamondre Joe and all these guys, CJ Blocker as your top 4 corners there. But you're going to need some of these returners to step up and take their game to a new level. Like if it's all dependent on the transfers, that's a lot of moving pieces. The guys you do bring back, Lorich and McDowell and all these other guys I've just talked about, they really need them to perform well. All those guys are in line, to start, I would say. They're probably the front runners, but can they take advantage of this opportunity? And that's going to be really key for CSU is hitting on some of these guys that you've signed in these last couple of cycles and them kind of taking things to the next level. I'd say the exact same thing about the offensive line. And again, it's spring, like take this with a grain of salt, but it's looking like Christian Martin, the front runner, start at left tackle, 6'6", 270. Tanner Morley obviously started at left guard. He returns 6'7", 315. Trevin Heel, he at the moment 6'2", 275. A little bit light. He's listed at 6'2", 275. I think that's generous. he's a redshirt senior. So, I mean, he's got a ton of experience. He played a little bit last year when Gardner went down and actually handled himself well. But just you'd like a little bit more size there if you could. But hey, if they trust him and he's got a good relationship with BFN, that's fine with me. Right guard, it's looking like it'll be Ader Uriana Baranchea, 6'5", 320 pounds. And then at right tackle, you've got Aaron Karras, another vet that you've had in the program these last couple of years, 6'5", 310 pounds. These are all players that whether it started at Nevada, I don't think Karras actually started there. I think he just committed to Nevada and then signed with CSU as a freshman. But these are all players that you have, recruited and brought into your program and developed, which is a very encouraging sign. It's going to be a hard way to make a living consistently if every year you're dependent on 3-4 transfers in your offensive line. It's a lot of pieces you're counting on coming together. You were able to do it with some success these last couple of years, but that was kind of always the hope, was moving forward, you're going to be able to depend on the Tanner Morleys and the Ader Uriana Barancheas of the world and be able to have some homegrown talent. Now, obviously, retaining them over the years, that can be a conversation as well. But I like where the direction of the offensive line is headed, which is more guys you've signed and developed, and then you bring in some transfers to provide you depth. You've got a guy like MJ Senegal, probably going to be a swing tackle for you. You could, Wortman is another guy that could be in the mix for you. But the fact that it's guys that you've signed out of high school, had in your program the last couple of years, and you're now counting on them to take that next step, they've got to do it. But this is what you need if you're going to be able to have a success with any type of consistency, because again, it's a hard living if your entire roster has to be built through the portal. It's not to say you can't have success. I mean, it's a big part of what college football is today, and you're going to be able, you're going to have to be able to, I should say, hit on multiple transfers every year to fill starting gaps. I mean, that's just the reality we're in. You need Jacquez Evans. You need some of these guys who are going to fill big roles for you. But like in the trenches, at QB, that type of stuff, you've got to be able to have a little bit of continuity. And I just think the fact that they've had the same offensive line staff for a couple of years, they've had these guys in the building, they've worked with them, they're familiar with the system. In theory, that should bode well for CSU. We'll see how these guys perform. We'll see how they, hang in the scrimmages. I will say the one thing that I've always valued from spring football is if the defense is just dominating the offense, that can be a little bit worrisome. That's how it was a couple years ago, especially in the trenches. But I'm encouraged by the direction of the offensive line. I think the backfield is loaded, and the guys certainly passed the eye test. Justin Marshall, Jalen Dupree, what you've got in those two. I think there's an opportunity for them to be a big part of the offense, to be really, really good. Marshall, incredibly explosive, but he wears down. And we've seen that. Dupree, I think, has a chance to be really the top back this year if he can take this role by the reins like I think he's capable of. But Lloyd Avant, the Tulsa transfer, looks the part. You've also got Van Shield and Keegan Hollis, who are both playable. So, I mean, I think the backfield is going to be a real strength of this team. And as much as we envisioned maybe an offense that was going to lean more into the passing attack again, I do wonder if some of the stuff that's happened at wide receiver over the last month or so changed some things, and we see more of that, West Coast influence again next year. I don't know. We'll see. But I will admit that I've had that thought, especially given the talent you have at running back. Like you're certainly more proven there than you are at wide receiver or tight end or anywhere else. That should be one of your strengths. Can you lean into it? For me, I would like to see them run the ball with a similar type of consistency, but then build off of it, stretch the field vertically with some play action shots. Basically go old school Elway. Yeah, we're going to run the ball down your throat with TD, but we're also going to, test your secondary and then their discipline when you come crashing in, and we're going to try and burn you over the top with Rod Smith and Eddie Mack and all that type of stuff. Now, maybe you don't run quite as much as the Broncos in the late 90s just because you're not going to have that type of O-line. But I do think it'll be a strength for the offense. But BFN taking things to the next level will be big factor in what this team is able to accomplish this year. Like if the Rams are going to be a championship caliber team, if they're going to, try and win 8, 9, 10 games. Like, I do think that BFN is going to have to shoulder a lot of that responsibility. And as third-year starting quarterback, you would expect him to be able to do so. It is a tough spot. He's always been in a tough spot in terms of just the lack of continuity at the pass catchers, but you're going to have some guys, Rocky Beers looks really good. I think Jordan Ross is in line to have a great season. Maybe someone like Dylan Goffney can step up, after redshirting this past year. Maybe Armani Winfield, is able to take things to the next level. He flashed last year, certainly can run well, but he had some drop issues, needs to be a little bit more consistent as a route runner, all that type of stuff. But ultimately, like, a lot of this is going to fall on BFN, who at times has been a baller. I mean, he has made some huge throws, some throws that not a lot of quarterbacks are even physically capable of making. He also is very inconsistent with his accuracy at times, just because of, I attribute it to footwork. Again, I'm not a quarterback guru, but I think when you're throwing off your back foot, not stepping up all the time, I can cause you to miss some intermediate throws that you probably shouldn't be missing. I'd like to see him hit some of those with consistency. I also think that the receivers were a factor in all that too. Like, to put it all on him would be unfair. I will say though, like, the expectations for this team are high. He's one of your captains. He started 2 seasons worth of games at this point. They need him to be money. They need him to take it to the next level and like have a really good season. And that doesn't mean he needs to throw for 5,000 yards or anything like that. But can you limit the turnovers? Can you hit the open throws when you're there? I do think having some tight ends that you can attack the middle of the field with more consistency will be big for him. You saw what he was able to do with Dallin Holker a couple of years ago. I feel like not having that role in the offense last year was extremely detrimental, especially given Torrey's injury situation. I mean, they hoped for it. It just didn't really work out. With Vince Brown, again, I am very surprised he landed at Missouri. I think he's a good athlete. There just was nothing he showed last year as a tight end that jumped off the page to me as this guy could be a playmaker in the SEC. We'll see, I guess. But I think BFN and him being able to build off of, that there were some encouraging things he showed last year in terms of limiting the turnovers, but also, had some struggles at times, in some of those bigger games. Can he be the guy that elevates you in the way that, Garrett Grayson did, like BVP did, like all the great quarterbacks do? And it's kind of prove it time for him. He's flashed a bunch. I've talked about it, what he could be, a million times, and I believe that. I also think that we'll know pretty early on in the season, what type of year it's going to be based on, what we see under center and the type of throws he's able to make and what the offense looks like in general. Like, I just really hope it's not a situation, whether you're running the ball or not, I just hope it's not like September last year where every game feels like it's just a slog and you're playing in mud, basically. Like, just scoring points early on in the year was such a struggle for this team. And you're hoping that with a third-year quarterback, regardless of who's around him, he's able to kind of make some plays and elevate the offense. Do think that Ross is intriguing. I think Rocky Beers is really intriguing. Maybe someone like Levon Brown can make a leap. Maybe the running backs can make a leap out of the backfield. I'd like to see, Justin Marshall maybe get some more screens and stuff like that, although I don't know if his vision in those scenarios has proven to be phenomenal over the years, but we'll see. Maybe he can make a leap in that element of his game, or maybe it's someone like Lloyd Avant or Hollis who runs really well. But this offense has got to be more consistently explosive than they were last year. It doesn't mean you got to go 4 verts every play. It just means you've got to find a way to create chunk plays and to put points on the board and to make defenses sweat a little bit, because that's kind of what we always envisioned when Norvell came over from Nevada. And there have been games, there have been moments, but it's never quite felt like what it felt like in 2019 with Carson Strong and Reno. And now Carson Strong's on staff. Maybe him coming in will be a big factor with what allows BFN to kind of take things to the next level there. But I just think that's going to be such an important factor for what CSU is able to do. It's a tough position when you're the quarterback. Like, you get an unfair amount of blame when things go wrong. You also probably get more credit than you deserve at times. When you win, that's the quarterback. You get all the glory, but you get all the criticism as well. You need a third-year guy to take things to the next level, and that's going to be one of the biggest storylines for CSU this year is whether he's able to do that or not. Again, we'll be going live Friday morning. Tomorrow afternoon, Torrey Horton will be having an individual pro day, so we'll talk about what we see from him. I'll be back at football practice, so we'll get some more interviews, players, coaches, get you more perspective of what's happening with this program in year 4 under Jay Norvell. A lot of new pieces, though, on both sides of the ball. That's all I've got for you guys this morning. Shout out to everybody that's rocking with us. So much love to everybody in Ram Nation. Much love to Alyssa behind the sticks, making this all happen. Always proud to be y'all. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.